Welcome to A Canadian Investing in the U.S., a podcast and YouTube channel focused on Canadians buying real estate with host Glenn Sutherland.
Welcome to a new episode of A Canadian Investing in the U.S. This week, my guest is Kyle Pearce. Kyle, let's give everybody a bit of an intro to yourself.
Hey, Glenn, thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here with you to chat a little bit about investing, real estate, the United States, and all of those wonderful things. I'm from Windsor, Ontario, and I started out as a teacher, turned into a consultant, a math consultant, and along the journey, I was really intrigued by investing in real estate, and in particular in the U.S. back in 2010, 2012. So pretty well versed back there, and now I'm kind of doing all things: education, real estate, and some fun in between.
That's awesome. And like just buying back in that 2010, 2012 range, there was first, there's a ton of appreciation that's happened since then. The market in the US was really depressed at that point. And if my memory is correct, the dollar was pretty close to par around those same times. That was kind of the factors that drove you into there at that time?
Yeah, I was really intrigued. To be honest, I would say I'm a slow mover, maybe an over learner, like lifelong learner. It's a good thing and a bad thing, because oftentimes it's like, you go down the rabbit hole and it's like you learn something and then you learn there's a little more to it and a little more to it. And then you're off over here. And, so I would say it was probably around 2006, 2007 when I picked up my first book that was all about real estate. I knew that, there was something here. Like I've got to figure this thing out. Life was in the way, was, working, beginning my career, all of those things. And, after the US market sort of took the, the financial crisis, the nosedive, all of those things, I was going, like some of these homes have been, way up here and now they're way down here. I'm like, I got to figure this thing out. So that's when I really dove in. And, I wish I dove in harder because, back then I had only picked up 2 properties, but at the time, early in my career, not a ton of money or net worth to my name. It was at the time felt super risky. And now looking back on it, I'm going, oh my gosh, I wish I bought, 10 times as many properties.
You just mentioned your first book to get into real estate. I'm just curious, do you remember what book it was?
To be honest, there was one book and I don't know what the name was, but it intrigued me. But then the second book I picked up, which was, I would say the game changer for me, was Rich Dad, Poor Dad, because it really spoke to me because I'm an educator, right? So I was the poor dad who was working super hard to pay off his mortgage. I was putting all my money into my mortgage payment every month. And like in my mind, I was like, I'm a genius. Like, I'm so smart. This is great. Everything's awesome. And then I read that book and go, oh my gosh, I'm basically taking all this money and turning it into debt equity, which again, better than blowing it on, on things that go down in value, but not obviously optimal. So that's when I started learning about the home equity line of credit. And that's how I ended up funding, our first few properties.
So you're investing back in, starting, I know you're still investing now, but you're starting back in 2010, 2012, you're going to a new country, new stuff. If this isn't too personal, like where did you screw up? What problems? What did you do to fix it? I don't know. I know people are always interested in like the first issues that because a lot of people are interested in doing their first one.
Yeah, I'll be honest and say that I'm going to say maybe lucked out. Maybe that's the wrong word, because again, I did my due diligence so much. I flew down to, first spot for me was Florida. And, something I've mentioned on my own podcast, The Invested Teacher, is this idea that my intro, what got me to actually act, was looking at it as if it doesn't work as an investment property, that I would have a second home. So I was like, where would I want a second home? It's Florida. And it wasn't on the beach, but I was like, at least it's like I could feel good about that if it doesn't work out. So I ended up buying a property, which now, knowing what I know, was the wrong property, because it was a property that I wanted to live in, right? Yeah. Instead of something that maybe someone renting might want to live in. So probably went to the higher end of the market. Probably could have got I know I could have got properties a whole lot cheaper. So maybe paid, we'll call it double, had high HOA fees, all of those things. Was barely cash flowing. But at the time for me, I was just like, I wanted something that I felt like if I couldn't rent it, like everyone has this, this mindset when they get into the idea of rental properties, like, what if no one will rent it? And it's like, there's always going to be a renter. Maybe your price has to come down, right? But the reality is there's always going to be someone to rent it. But back then I was like, if we can't rent it, it's okay, because we could afford the payments, and it was, you know what I mean? It was going to be a great property if we were going to use it. So that was what got me in, and I'm so happy I did. And I would say like my biggest mistake with those properties, I have more recent mistakes, but back with those first two properties that I had purchased way back when, I would say the biggest mistake I made was when I ended up selling one of them. Luckily I waited until around 2016 to do so. So there was a good amount of appreciation, but had I held it until now, I would have been laughing, even more so. So I'd say my biggest mistake, and I think a lot of investors feel the same way, like biggest mistake is selling. As soon as you sell, you're sort of going like, oh my gosh, that property would be worth this much today. And, unless you have a really specific spot for that capital that you're going to pull out in order to put into another deal that's going to be more lucrative, you really want to just like, pump the brakes on that and really think it through, instead of, sort of seeing that end result of, hey, here's the profit I had. Like, it's in there, the wealth's there, and you need to trust that it, unless you've got a better spot for it, maybe hanging on and, letting it ride is a better move.
I like it. And then like, if someone's trying to picture this, so what part of Florida are we talking about? Like, is this, because you also said like it was a property for you rather than a tenant. Like, does that mean there's a pool involved? Because that's usually where I go down that path. Whenever it's for me, it has a pool. When there's a tenant, I'm like, I don't want to clean the pool for them.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. This one was actually, the first one was in Fort Myers.
Okay.
Now I did a lot. And again, part of my due diligence, which again, like too much due diligence, was looking at all of Florida. And, I could probably name you streets in every major, area of Florida, because I was looking for like essentially an entire year, every single night. I was on, Zillow and, realtor.com and all of these, all the different sites, searching and looking around and zoning in and calling realtors. And I landed on Fort Myers, partially because I think I liked that side. I remember going to like Clearwater, that side of of Florida on the Gulf side when I was a kid. And I'll just say it, Brett Kroom, who was the realtor at the time, was the best realtor experience I had as an out of towner. Took the time, cared, all of these things. And essentially it was his like, care for me that sort of got me to fly down there and actually look at properties. Whereas, I think everybody else sort of treated me as a tire kicker, which I was, but it was like his dedication to me and the success that I was after is what made me go, I guess it's Fort Myers is where we're going to focus on. So that's where we ended up looking and buying, in short time once we met with Brett.
Yeah, awesome. So if we didn't plan this at all, so I'm really throwing him on the spot. If you're gonna say anything that's changed in your investment strategy for markets or anything different from then to now, the way you buy things, the way you do anything.
Mm-hmm. I would say, there's a couple things. Like back then, the way the market was, it just, to me, I'll call myself like a value investor. Like at heart, I love things at a deal, right? So I think that's what attracted me to the US in the first place. I haven't purchased anything recently in the US simply because it is a lot harder. And, now I have kids, I have a family, I've got, my job and side hustles and my own investment properties, even here locally in Windsor, Essex County area of Ontario. Yep. And, it's so much harder to be an expert in a market that you're not like in, or that you can't commit to being like fully in the way I was back then. So back then it worked, but now I've really kind of focused more locally. And when I want to diversify out of this market, that's when I sort of turn to looking around and sniffing out other JVs So
Yeah.
typically locally here, I want to be, the managing partner, and I'm looking for money partners.
Right.
But if I want to go outside of this area, I want to lean on the expertise of folks like you, like Glenn. If I want your area, I want to JV with you, and I want to give you some of the capital that I'm not spending here to spread it around over there. So I would say that's like one of my biggest shifts in mindset is like, know your market. And if it's the US, maybe it's Fort Myers and you want to do that, you just got to make sure you really know it, have a good pulse on it, and become sort of the go-to in that area. And I just feel that locally here, it's just easier because I live here and I'm in and I'm around, and I just know what's going on in the area.
Yeah. Yeah, interesting. And you're down in Windsor. So like whenever I hear people from Windsor, you hear a lot of people interested in investing in Michigan. Is there a reason you didn't go Michigan? I guess it was more that you wanted to have the backup plan to actually live at. Michigan is not great for vacationing in the winter.
Yeah. Hey, unless you pick some, Boyne Mountain, some of those northern places are really great, Gaylord and all those awesome spots. But
hello, everybody. Thanks for listening to the podcast. I just wanted to let you know that I've created a new coaching program. I believe the new coaching program has way more value than any of the programs that have even existed in the past. What we've done is pre-recorded all the lessons so that you can work through it at your own pace, which is pretty cool. And then we're going to meet up on a regular basis to answer the questions, do deal analysis, and actually spend our time together working on things instead of spending our time learning things. I think this will make a seamless transition to buying in the United States and will help you solve a lot of your problems. If this is of interest to you, go to glensutherland.com/coaching. I hope to help you guys invest in the United States, and I hope we provide as much value as possible. Back to the podcast.
Yeah, no, Detroit it's an interesting one. And actually I'm looking more seriously now. And what I'm really interested in is actually spending some time and getting over to some of the public auctions. And, I know that area. So a lot of me sort of thinks is like, I want to say partially laziness now. Back then it was like you had said, it was like, I never really looked at, Michigan as right for me at the time, just because again, my backup plan that I wanted to like feel good about. Now I look at it and I think really my only limiting factor now in looking to Detroit more seriously is sort of developing the team on that side of the border. So I do have some plans to go over there. One other piece as well is, just thinking as well, just about, lending is a little more challenging if you want to go with, like a first or a primary lender, right? So that could be more challenging for Canadians. So, but it's definitely on my radar. I've been doing a lot of snooping around, a lot of, looking at some of the more like suburb markets, and I would really like to start expanding back on that side of the border as well.
Yeah. So I remember just with our interactions before the podcast, you were talking about you had some sort of education platform or something. You're at one point you're helping people in the US. What did that look like? What were you was it helping people invest in Florida specifically, or just how to invest in the US? How did that kind of look?
Yeah, like, well, when I did so much learning for myself, like selfishly, like like I said, lifelong learner. I'm an educator, I'm a math teacher, and a math consultant, and I still do that as sort of my main work. But back then I did such a deep dive that I'm like, okay, so I bought some properties. At the time I felt like I was at my max. I really wasn't at my max. I could have, purchased more, but I wanted to sort of like wait and see. And I was thinking to myself like, wow, done so much learning. I have so many contacts. What am I going to do with all this information? And in my head, I was thinking, hey, being able to like imagine there was a website that I had at that time that could have led me down the path, So I was calling, realtors about, which properties, which areas, which locations. I was calling lenders, like, what are the rules? Like, can I get a mortgage in the US? Like, can I, what do I need to do? How do I get the money over there? Like, do I need to like open a bank account and all of those things? And basically what I started doing was documenting the process that I had, learned along the way. And the website was called, I'm sort of sad I let it, sort of drift away, but it was called CanadaBuySouth.ca. And at the time, my goal was to try to link people with different mortgage brokers, realtors, and to start generating some referral fees. And that was sort of the ultimate goal down the road. So really for a long time, it was just an open, free resource for people to leverage. And I was just trying to build some momentum there. And then, kind of ran into some licensing issues there. It's like, well, how do you get a referral fee from here to there? And, it was really early in the entrepreneurial journey. So, a lot of learning there. I enjoyed doing it. And honestly, I would say that was my start to beginning some of the work I do now, which is math consulting online courses, and now the Invested Teacher podcast and our mentorship program there. So we ton of learning there to kind of get our feet wet. And now it's sort of like we're now honing in on, more of our, we'll call it our superpowers that we can offer others in the world.
I love it. You just mentioned online courses. I'm going in my head, I'm going, man, I didn't even know you did that. And now I'm going, do we go down that path? Because I'm really interested in online courses and built some myself. And I'm like, or do we stick on path? I don't know. What do you think?
Hey, totally.
Stay focused or
I'm
not?
I'm an open book here, So
oh, I'm so not good at staying focused. Okay. We'll keep it quick, but online courses. So maybe let's just because I'm kind of interested in it. So what are you building right now?
Yeah, well, I mean, what we built over the past like 5 or 6 years ago was actually online courses for math educators to teach mathematics better. I'm sure there's people listening who, sort of like the rich dad, poor dad story, Kiyosaki, so many people who are successful, Grant Cardone, who are successful but weren't successful at school, like they and oftentimes they name math class as one of those places. So I wanted to make that experience better for students, and through that process, redefining what it looked like to learn math in my classroom, started blogging, sharing, and then offering online courses for teachers. So learning all of the marketing strategies that go along with it. I've learned so much. I've, obviously earned some side, income from that, which is fantastic. But then it was like, wow, again, learning all of this over here has led me to go, well, I'm really passionate about real estate. I'm really passionate about investing. So that's what started this sort of other, side of the business, which is our Invested Teacher podcast, which is sort of like our top of funnel to get people interested, not only for joint venture possibilities or funding opportunities, but then also for mentorship programs and courses. So we're in the development of that phase. Right now, we're just working with, private, folks who are looking for mentorship, looking for the support. Maybe they don't have like a good group locally. Maybe their friend group, for example, aren't really interested in the same things. Like people run into that all the time, right? Where they at the campfire want to talk about, real estate and deals, and everybody else just wants to talk about the ball game or the hockey game, right? And, you're sort of going, where do I go? Like, how do I take the next step? So that's been, sort of our current focus is like, all right, we love helping people. We love educating. I love teaching math. I'm like, why not take all of this, knowledge and experience that we've had between myself and a few partners and bring this to other people so we can, kind of build that community.
Love it. If someone was going to go try and build their own course, I'm just curious about the path you went down when you were starting this. It sounds like it wasn't as much about the money, right? So I know I hear some people, they do like a pre-sale just to make sure there's some interest in it before they start. Do you just make all the material first? How do people find you to take this course? Like how did the whole process of building this start?
It's a great question, because I think a lot of people think, it's interesting because a lot of people ask me and my partners who have done some of this work with us, and they ask things like, how did you start your side hustle, for example?
Right.
And, for us, it was passion driven. So we were doing it, and how we generated our audience was through the sharing of everything we could do. Like we were blogging every day. We were all of these things. Like it wasn't a money thing at all. Now for other people, they're going, well, like, I don't really, have like a 5-10 year sort of like runway to do this. So would I do it the same way now? Probably not. But I think a good filter that people should use is that, are you actually passionate about doing the work? because it is a lot of work. And, if you're only doing it, let's say for the dollar at the end of the day, there might be a better opportunity for them to make money somewhere else, right? Like find a great real estate deal. And you know what I mean? Like you might make more money doing that for less effort. Whereas on the other hand, if you're passionate about teaching, if you're passionate about sharing, it could be a great revenue stream as well. And I would recommend, like what you had just said, is trying to generate some interest would be key. So someone like yourself who has a podcast, that's a lot easier because you probably now have an email list that's developed, right? So it's sort of this process of like, you want to kind of, have a plan, but then also kind of build the plane while you're flying it at the same time, if at all possible. So you're generating some of these, these leads, building your audience, because of course you don't want to spend all your time building your course and realize you have no one to sell it to, or you have to turn to paid advertising where no one knows you. So you want to start, sort of thinking about, hey, what can I offer out there to sort of get my name out, to get the know, like, trust factor up. And then as you start to see what people are appreciating about what you're sharing, that actually helps you with what you actually can create a course around as well, right? Because oftentimes people have this idea, they want to record a course, and it's all stuff that people actually don't want. And that's obviously not very good either, right? So it's a really interesting piece. I would say, again, build that audience as you go. And I love the idea of that pre-sale, like asking people, getting on as many calls, just like, I would call this, our first time chatting, and we try to get on as many calls with people to understand what they're struggling with, because that's what people are going to be willing to open up their wallets for anyway, right? If you're solving a problem they don't have or don't realize they have, they won't know to buy it. So you have to hear what it is they want or need, what they perceive they want and need, and then you have to sell them what they think they need, but give them what they actually need. So there's kind of like an interesting science there, right? Because if you give them what they think they need and it doesn't actually help them achieve the thing that they want to achieve, then they think your course is bad. So you have to have this, balance. You're selling what they think they want, but you're giving them what they actually need. And that, I think, is the perfect combination.
Doesn't sound like an easy task.
Yeah, it is hard. It's hard work, but it's so fun too at the same time. As long as you
doing something
like
you love.
It. Yeah, totally.
All right, Kyle, this was awesome. I know we have to do this again. We'll have to schedule one maybe in the fall. But Kyle, people want to get a hold of you. They wanted to hear about your Invested Teacher podcast. They want to know about the courses. Like, where do they find you?
Yeah, head on over to investedteacher.com. We're on all podcast platforms. So, Apple Podcasts, search Invested Teacher, anywhere you're at. And come on a journey with us, and you'll hear more of me and my two partners, Matt and John. And we chat about all things, not just real estate, but heavily real estate, but all things investing, all things wealth generating. And we're kind of speaking to like the particular audience as people who might feel like maybe they're in like a golden handcuff situation, government jobs, white collar sort of jobs, doctors, nurses, teachers, and, people who don't want to just sort of wait for that retirement plan to hopefully pan out for them, and they want to do something on top. That's really what audience we're trying to serve.
That's awesome. I'm going to check it out. You might see a new subscriber pop up with Glenn Sutherland today. So anyway,
awesome, my friend.
Thanks for coming on the show, Kyle. I really appreciate it. This was great.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, and hope you have an awesome day.
Same.
That was a nice video. Bye.